All's my life I has to fight.
I probably will have the most unprofessional presentation that you all have seen in a while, right? It's a joke, y'all can laugh, right? But one of the things that when Professor Valdez actually contacted me to talk to you all about what's been happening across the country and here in California, and I'm bringing this concept, the construct from Illinois, is there's something that's happening in school space that we are very fearful of talking about, that we're very fearful of addressing, and in education, we are much too concerned about being nice, right? When the lives of the young folks that we work with are not nice, right? We're right here next to Salinas, California. Folks know what's happening in Salinas, right? So, I mean, this thing around really being clear, right? So we're right here next to Seaside, California, right? That has another very interesting history, right? You wouldn't even think that black folks used to live in Seaside, right? But you had this large history of folks living in Seaside since World War II, right? When I drove up to Monterey, I saw a set of Army barracks. And the first thing, and now y'all got this language institute here in Monterey, right? A language institute that specializes in languages from the Middle East. What are they doing? Where are they sending people? Right? And we walk past that. Right? We don't think about how our context informs what it is that we do in our day-to-day. Right? So, me being from Illinois, I don't know if y'all have paid attention to this. We are the brokest state and the worst place, according to U.S. News and World Report, to live in. Right? Illinois is $40 billion in debt. It has not had a budget for 11 months. Since 2004, it has closed 150 schools in the city of Chicago. Right? So drug treatment centers have closed. Places that, preschools that serve young folks and families aren't able to pay their bills. And as the young folks say, we out here. Right? It's a whole different thing to think about. But another thing that we have to do to complicate this is really start to think about how we understand this term social justice. I'm very concerned because now social justice is everything and anything, right? Just like multicultural education was 30 years ago, right? It's anything and everything, right? And for me, even as a college professor, I'm trying to challenge myself. So the challenge for me is I teach 8th period to seniors. Let me say that again. 8th period to seniors. Anybody remember what they was doing 8th period? And look, I'm seeing this Cali stuff, so I'm like, man, nice day, 8th period, right? Last period of the day, it's you, the homies. Somebody told you they liked you. It's a Friday, right? No, you looking around like, oh shit, look, it's 8th period, man, look, right? You talking to the homies like, look, what we about to do after this? Look, deal with this instruction, all that, this garbage, like, what we gonna do, right? So this thing around looking at that concept in practice now begs a different question. And this is something that I think in school spaces and in teaching that we haven't really started to grapple with. Now, my comments today are not to depress the shit out of you. Right? Because that's another thing too, right? When we start talking about situations, y'all can leave the first 15 minutes, damn, Stovall said we all gonna die, right? But that's not the piece here. The thing is to understand the moment that we're in. A lot of times I'll borrow from folks who do English language arts, and I always think about a person named James Baldwin who talks about a radical imaginary, right? And a radical imaginary means the ability to confront the world as it is while also being committed to create something new. So if we think about a radical imaginary, now we have to start with the is. You have a movement in the United States to end public education as we know it. Right? I mean, forthright. I mean, now you got this privatization move by way of charters. You got business folks talking about education as a recession-resistant market. Let me put that out there again. Right? A recession-resistant market that's based on a customer service model. and that's school. But here's the thing, and here's the challenge. And when we talk about anything that has to do with justice, justice often means that you're going to have to interrupt some things, right? You're going to have to challenge the way things are, right? And as my seniors say, Stovall, you're going to have to figure out how to break shit. So now, if we understand this thing to be true, where are the ruptures? Where do we break things? Where is our commitment? What are we trying to build? Because if we're not, then this claim to social justice is a false one. Because justice has to be determined first by the people who have experienced the injustice. And we do all this, we make this mistake in schools, right? We always talk about age-appropriate material. That is the most bullshit statement in the world, right? Because poverty is not age-appropriate. Racism and white supremacy is not age-appropriate, right? And if we know those things to be true, then how do we confront those in our classrooms? And then in our classrooms, in challenging what it is that we do, are we even willing to say that there's a difference between school and education? Because the majority of us hated the shit out of school. Real talk. And some of you all are becoming teachers because you hated school so much, and now you hope that you can do something different. Or, think about it again. Everybody who had a good teacher, how many of those good teachers were always in trouble? Think about it. The teacher that you drew with was always in trouble. They were always in trouble. Why? Because they were committed to education. They didn't give a shit about school. School was this place. School really was closer to prison than what it was to actually getting stuff done, right? And if we look at schools, we can even see this, right? Think about it. In Chicago, we got schools that have a uniform. You got to wear a clear book bag, right? You got to wear a clear book bag. You walk through riot horses. You get wanded down. You got an observation deck. You get punished if you're not walking on lines. Some schools you have to walk with your hands behind your back. Other schools will not start instruction if you're not in the frisk position. And in some places, you even get a silent lunch. Where else do they do that? Jail. So the hell with a school to prison pipeline. We're talking about a school and prison nexus. We're talking about school and prison as the same place in some places, right? We're talking about a group of young folks who have been deemed disposable by the state. And now, school is more so an extension of slavery than it is anything about education. Now, if I'm committed to a radical imaginary, I have to start with that, right? I got to start on the first day. And of course, the other mistake we always make is that in our classrooms, we build up to things, right? We want to make sure that we have this progression into things. Let's start with what it is, right? What would it mean, 8th period, your senior year, you got a teacher who starts class and says, look, you all have been set up. The second thing is, the people who have been doing the setup actually hold the same position that I hold right now. Third, there is no good reason, given the history of schooling in the United States, for you to trust me. That's day one. You know, my students, Stovall, what is you doing? What is you talking about? Oh yeah, this is how we understand education. So now, understanding this thing to be true, what are you willing to interrupt? How are you willing to get in trouble? Because see, that's the other thing that we don't tell y'all about. So y'all got the curriculum fair, y'all got people you're going to talk to today who do this stuff in class. They do this stuff under duress, right? Your principals do not like you, right? And then you got one principal who's willing to ride, and they try to fire them first, right? You all can look up a story of a guy, one of my homies, close homies. His name is Troy LaRaviere. He's in Chicago, and he's been banging on the system. And they fired him for a meeting that he didn't attend, but they didn't email him that they were having the meeting. They sent the meeting snail mail and posted postmarked it the day of the meeting. Classic Chicago, right? Set you up and then blame you for what you didn't do. So now, again, I'm offering this challenge to us because I'm offering the challenge to myself, right? I'm not coming to you all as expert. I'm coming to you as somebody who struggles with this because I'm seeing young folks in their day-to-day grapple with this, right? So in Chicago, it's not so much that young folks ran Trump out of the city, right? That I wish they would have did in Burlingame, but it was a whole little situation in Cali a couple days ago, right? But they run Trump out of the city because as our public consciousness is raising, also is our despair. And when these two things meet, it's funky. It's nasty. Chicago has had 500 shootings in the first 80 days, 156 homicides. So some dude dares to come to a place, to a university that's 30% Latino and 50% not afraid to die. And I think that's the other part that people don't get. People were willing to rush that stage because people's thinking is, what else can they do to us? They've closed our schools. We've been gentrified out of our neighborhoods. Folks can't find work. What else is left? And what will we do based on those conditions? Right? So now you're pressed up in a very different way. I'm saying this as a 43-year-old who's employed. I could be in a faculty meeting sometimes like, man, right now, the only thing that's stopping you from getting really messed up really bad is me thinking about the consequences. But if I was in my first 87th Street mind, I would go to jail with a smile on my face, right? So this is me as an employed person, right? With a gig to retirement, so they say. That's the lie about tenure. Tenure does not mean they won't fire you. Tenure means it's just a little harder to fire you. They need to find more excuses, right? Because when you do this work, you are doing it in a space that is contested, right? So now, the people who actually espouse to do this same work will be the same people that keep you alive, right? And if they don't, then we got a problem. And this is what it is. So not justice, social justice is not picking up trash on a block in Salinas, right? It's not community project day, right? Justice is when them kindergartners say, look, we know that person in front of the classroom is messing with us, and this thing ain't right, and we ain't gonna go today. What do you do during the kindergarten revolution? 35 young bloods all tell you simultaneously, no. What you gonna do? Right? But my thing is always, most of the time they're telling us no for a good reason. Young people's bullshit meter is small, right? They know very clearly when something is not right. And now, how do we respond when they actually identify this thing that they know to be incorrect? How do we move in solidarity with them? So if we're talking about anything that has to do with justice, that justice now is determined by that condition. It is determined by that context and our willingness to either defend that and defend our young folks or to submit to the colonial project of racism and white supremacy. I think about it that simply, right? It is not a popular decision. But if we understand this moment to be what it is, we have to be clear about this. There is no running from this. Teaching is not a neutral space. Teaching is the most political decision that you will ever make. Right? This is a gig that is connected to the most human of human interactions. And you don't like everybody every day. Right? So all y'all said who were in Professor Valdez's class and y'all like, oh, I just want to teach because I love the babies. No, you don't. No? And you're not going to love them every day. Right? So this thing around, well, you'll love them, but you won't like them, right? Because love is a revolutionary act. Love is a revolutionary act that occurs even in the face of despair, right? So now you gotta fight to love. There's a song that this British artist named Quab has. It's called Fight for Love. I'm like, man, every day we feel like that. So I come to you all from Chicago where some days it's hard to read the paper. Real talk. But young folks have raised their public consciousness. So in rallies, I was talking to folks about this last night. I mean, I get hella emotional and tearful when I see young folks in rallies. And despite all the violence and all the despair that they're experiencing, they're yelling Kendrick Lamar's song, All Right. They're like, man, look, what more can you do to this? We gonna be all right, right? No matter what you do, right? There will be no destruction of our human will and spirit. So now, if we're talking about justice, how are our classroom spaces reflective of that human will and spirit, given very challenging times, where we are still too damn nice and too afraid to call this thing what it is? Racism, white supremacy, ageism, ableism, homophobia, heteropatriarchy. To name it and to do it unflinchingly because we don't do it alone. Now, let me check in with y'all. Is this making sense? I told y'all I was unprofessional, right? So, but this thing around how we do what we do becomes critically important. So today, as you work with folks and see folks and interact with them, be sure to ask these critical questions, because these critical questions are the things that not only give us the food to continue, but they're also the words and actions that keep us alive. Is that making sense? All right. Well, thank y'all so much. You know?